Hello. In this video, I'm going to be reading a poem called James John Marquez III. Can you imagine not having been able to have a proper bowel movement for over half your life? Can you imagine not being able to go anywhere unaided, unassisted, because that's the only way you can? Can you imagine not having bathed yourself in decades, not being able to do what most people do without thought? Can you imagine always being on someone else's schedule, never your own, beholden with no other recourse? Can you imagine always being on guard because your body is not your lifelong companion, it's your worst enemy? Can you imagine always being afraid of getting sick because it could be the thing that is your undoing? Can you imagine always having to grind it away, minute by minute, hour by hour, day by day? Routine, monotonous routine. Can you imagine always being in fear because what you have to do to ensure the next day comes makes you a criminal? Can you imagine always being doubted because you don't look the way people think a sick person should look? Can you imagine always seeing your house as a container, not a home, virtual prison, house arrest for just breathing? Can you imagine it always being like this, no relief in sight, no end till the final curtain comes calling? Can you imagine always being grateful for each of your hardships and not wanting to change one thing at all? Well, this is a pretty interesting poem from my perspective. It's about my best friend. One of my oldest best friends, his name is James John Marquez III, and I call him John. I wrote this, according to my little note here, on the 16th of August, 2017. And at that time, he'd gotten diagnosed with prostate cancer. And I was able to come home and help him. And on this particular evening, he was in the bathroom, and the walls in his house are pretty thin, and he was taking a dump, and it was pretty loud, and it sounded like a fire hose, just to put it bluntly. And it got me thinking that practically since first time I met him, because a couple months after I first met the guy, I ended up moving in with him. He'd been doing that, and at this point it'd been 25 years or so, and he'd gotten sick in 91, 92, somewhere around in there, and came down with wasting syndrome. And I met him because I was a pothead, and my cousin knew him, and we went over to his house, and one thing led to another, and so I'm sitting here, and I'm thinking about all the things that my friend had been through, and things I'd been there, with him, and things he'd talked about, and I just started writing, and I decided to go, to make it empathy, to get on the reader's empathy, to put yourself in his place. Can you imagine blah 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 blah, and partially the structure of the poem expresses that. It's each question is a couplet, and it's a rhetorical question. Can you imagine not having been able to have a proper bowel movement for over half your life? I hate it when that stuff is going wrong with me, and most people don't. You like that stuff to be regular. And can you imagine being homebound and not being able to travel if you want to, without having an elaborate system set up, and just being disabled, being sick. He's a medical marijuana patient, So, especially back in the 90s when I first met him, here where we live, if you got caught with seeds in your car, you were going to jail. So he's been a criminal, and luckily the things have changed in that area for the better, thank God. Or other things here that I had, I addressed on. And I think the most important thing, though, because we'd had that discussion about being grateful, being thankful for things. And he said that if, he hadn't gone through what he's gone through, he wouldn't be the person he is. And he likes the person he is, which, a lot of people who don't go through half of what some people do don't like who they are. And it was a very refreshing lesson to learn because, without that guy, I wouldn't be sitting here right now. I was in a bad marriage, and by the end of 2017, coming up here to help him, coming back home to help him, help me get perspective. And, it's funny, I told him one time, I actually thanked him for getting cancer because, well, thank God, to preface, he is cancer free. A couple years ago, because his cancer saga started over 5 years ago. But a couple years ago, he was pronounced cancer free. And one time I remember we were talking, and I thanked him for getting cancer because if he hadn't got cancer, I wouldn't have left a bad situation. I wouldn't have been able to get the perspective I needed to go on with my life and to take that next step. And being his friend and helping him like I do has enriched my life. Everybody needs a friend. Everybody needs a best friend, and I'm lucky to have this guy as my best friend. Well, I hope you thought this was interesting. Writing this poem was a pretty interesting experience. So do the like thing and subscribe and share and all that stuff, and I'll see you on the next one. Thank you. Thank you very much.